1934 Italy propaganda. The 1934 World Cup was more than just a soccer tournament. Benito Mussolini used the event as a massive billboard for his fascist regime. He wanted to show the world a strong, united, and modern Italy. To make sure the home team won, the government pulled some strings behind the scenes. Mussolini reportedly held private meetings with referees, including Ivan Eklund, the official for the final match. On the field, the effects were obvious. Italy played an incredibly aggressive game. Referees mysteriously looked the other way when Italian players committed harsh fouls, especially in tight matches against Spain and Austria. Italy ended up lifting the trophy after a 2-1 victory over Czechoslovakia. This early instance of sports washing shows how authoritarian leaders can successfully hijack popular sporting events to legitimize their rule globally. 1938 European favoritism. This was a major controversy surrounding the location of the Third World Cup. Back then, crossing the ocean by boat took weeks, so FIFA had an unofficial agreement to alternate hosting duties between South America and Europe. Since Italy hosted the 1934 tournament, everyone expected the 1938 games to return to South America. Argentina was so sure they would host that they started preparing early. Instead, FIFA held a vote in Berlin in 1936 and handed the tournament to France. The South American federations felt totally betrayed. Because of this blatant favoritism, Argentina and Uruguay launched a massive boycott of the tournament. Only Brazil ended up making the long trip across the Atlantic. This early clash over fairness still matters because it eventually forced FIFA to create strict hosting rules to keep global peace. 1966 African nation boycott. Back in 1964, FIFA made a rule for the upcoming 1966 World Cup in England. They decided that teams from Africa, Asia, and Oceania all had to fight for just one single spot in the tournament. Meanwhile, Europe and South America received almost all the guaranteed slots. The Confederation of African Football felt this was completely unfair. They demanded one guaranteed spot just for their continent. When FIFA refused to change the rules, the African nations took action. All 15 eligible African countries completely pulled out of the qualifying rounds. When the 1966 tournament kicked off, the entire continent of Africa was missing from the games. This massive protest forced FIFA to listen. By the very next World Cup in 1970, Africa finally received its own guaranteed spot, permanently changing how the world is represented in the sport. 1978 Argentina dictatorship. The 1978 World Cup in Argentina was a massive sporting event, completely overshadowed by a brutal military regime. General Jorge Rafael Videla seized power 2 years earlier. His junta quickly started kidnapping, torturing, and murdering thousands of citizens in secret. As the tournament kicked off, the government used the cheering crowds and glowing stadium lights to hide their crimes from the outside world. On the field, Argentina needed to beat Peru by 4 goals to reach the final. They suspiciously won 6-0. Rumors quickly spread that the military shipped thousands of tons of grain to Peru and unfroze bank accounts to buy the massive victory. Today, the 1978 tournament is still remembered as a dark example of how governments can use sports to mask terrible human rights abuses. 1998 bracket manipulation. The subject here is the behind-the-scenes rigging of the 1998 World Cup draw in France. Decades after the tournament, organizing committee co-president Michel Platini admitted that the organizers used a little trickery when setting up the brackets. They deliberately placed the defending champions, Brazil, and the host nation, France, on opposite sides of the schedule. Brazil went into Group A and France went into Group C. The organizers knew that if both teams finished first in their groups, the math guaranteed they could not face each other before the championship match. The plan worked perfectly. Both teams dominated their groups, navigated the knockout rounds, and met in the Paris final, where France won 3-0. This still matters today because it proves that even the most prestigious tournaments are vulnerable to deliberate tampering. 2002 bitter co-hosts. The 2002 World Cup was the very first time 2 countries shared the tournament. Japan and South Korea fiercely competed for the hosting rights, and neither wanted to back down. To avoid a massive diplomatic disaster, FIFA stepped in back in 1996 and forced them to share the event. It was an incredibly clunky process. There were two separate organizing committees, two different currencies, and plenty of chaotic travel arrangements across the water. The logistics were a headache, but the real mess happened on the pitch. South Korea made a stunning run to the semifinals by knocking out powerhouse teams like Italy and Spain. But those matches featured bizarrely bad referee decisions. Fans and players heavily accused the officials of being bribed to keep the co-hosts in the competition. It remains a messy warning about what happens when global sports and regional politics awkwardly collide. 2006 Germany Slush Fund. This was a secret pot of 6.7 million euros used by Germany's bidding committee to secure the 2006 World Cup. Back in 2000, the German team needed extra support to win the bid. They took a secret loan from a former sporting goods CEO to buy the votes of 4 Asian FIFA executive committee members. Years later, they paid the money back by quietly passing it through FIFA's own accounts. They labeled it as a payment for a grand cultural gala that never actually took place. The truth finally came out in 2015. German tax authorities raided the headquarters of the National Football Association, seizing files and computers to find evidence of tax evasion. Top football officials soon faced major criminal charges for fraud. It matters because it proved that even the most beloved modern tournaments were bought with dirty money. 2010 South Africa bribery. The 2010 South Africa bribery scandal is a major corruption case surrounding the first World Cup held in Africa. In 2015, the United States Department of Justice uncovered how the country actually won the right to host. Investigators found that officials agreed to pay a $10 million bribe to FIFA executive Jack Warner. To make the payoff look legal, they disguised the cash as a charitable fund. They called it a Diaspora Legacy Development Program meant to support soccer in the Caribbean. Instead, FIFA wired the money straight into personal accounts controlled by Warner. When the news broke, it shattered the image of the historic tournament and led to massive arrests. This case still matters today because it forced a complete overhaul of soccer leadership and proved that massive sporting events can be bought. 2014 Brazil mass evictions. The 2014 World Cup was supposed to be a massive celebration of soccer in Brazil. Instead, the government spent an estimated $15 billion on the tournament, including building huge, expensive stadiums in cities like Manaus that did not even need them. To make room for new roads and arenas, officials forced tens of thousands of people out of their homes in the favelas. Entire neighborhoods were simply bulldozed. On top of that, FIFA strong-armed Brazil into temporarily overturning a 2003 federal law banning alcohol sales in stadiums just to sell their sponsors beer. As a result, millions of Brazilians took to the streets in protests. They were furious that billions went to sports while local schools and hospitals crumbled. Today, this history still matters because it shows how global mega events can disrupt and exploit the everyday citizens forced to host them. 2018 Russia-Garcia Report. This is the story of how Russia secured the 2018 World Cup and the massive scandals that followed, when Michael Garcia led an official FIFA investigation into bribery allegations for the bidding process. He hit a dead end. The Russian bid team claimed they leased their computers from a private academy. After the vote, they said the hardware was returned and the hard drives were intentionally destroyed. Garcia could not check their emails or financial trails, leaving a permanent cloud over their victory. Around the same time, the host nation was exposed for running a massive state-sponsored athlete doping program. Officials secretly swapped dirty urine samples for clean ones to cheat international drug tests, a system that even included soccer players. This era still matters because it highlights how major sporting events can be corrupted from the very beginning. 2022 Qatar Human Rights. The 2022 World Cup in Qatar was one of the most controversial sporting events in recent history. When Qatar won the bid in 2010, allegations of widespread vote buying surfaced immediately. Because summer in the desert is too hot for soccer, the entire global sports calendar had to be moved to November. To get ready, Qatar went on a massive building spree. They needed stadiums, hotels, and roads, so they brought in millions of migrant laborers. These workers were trapped by the kafala system, a set of sponsorship laws giving employers total control over their visas and movement. The workers faced brutal heat and terrible living conditions. Investigations estimate that over 6,000 of these laborers died while building the tournament's infrastructure. This event forever changed how the world looks at the human cost behind massive international sporting spectacles. 2034 Saudi Arabia, uncontested. This is the story of how a single country won the biggest sporting event on Earth without a fight. In October 2023, FIFA announced a highly unusual plan for the 2030 World Cup. They decided to spread the games across 6 countries on 3 continents, putting matches in Europe, Africa, and South America. Under FIFA rules, continents that just hosted cannot bid for the next tournament. With North America hosting in 2026, the 2034 games were suddenly restricted entirely to Asia or Oceania. Saudi Arabia immediately stepped forward. Australia looked at the tight bidding deadline and backed out. When the clock ran out, Saudi Arabia was the only name left on the desk. It matters today because it shows how simple paperwork can hand a global stage to a nation accused of sports washing its reputation.